Disturbing true stories you'll think about tonight. Story 1, Silo 4. I took the night shift at the co-op because I needed the money before winter. It's a farm town, flat, black fields, and a horizon that looks like someone drew a line with a ruler. We have 6 silver grain silos lined up behind the office like giant batteries. I was responsible for monitoring the augers, checking temps, and logging moisture every 2 hours. Easy, boring, lonely. My station was a little prefab office with flickering fluorescents and a coffee maker that tasted like it had been through a combine. The only real noise was wind on the sheet metal and the distant groan of trucks on Route 19. If a sensor spiked, I'd grab my hard hat and go out with a handheld temp gun. Otherwise, I filled out paperwork and tried not to nap. The trouble started the second week of October. A little after 1 a.m., I stepped outside for air and saw a laser dot jitter across the side of Silo 4. Just a quick red fleck skittering up the ladder cage, then gone. It was so fast I told myself it was a reflection from a plane or a drone or even my own eyes. But 10 minutes later I saw it again, only this time the dot stopped on the inspection hatch as if someone were aiming. I walked the 80 yards over with my flashlight. Wind, insects, the creak of the ladder, nothing else. The hatch bolts looked untouched. I stood there long enough for my ears to start inventing sounds. I finally laughed at myself and went back in. At 2:06 a.m., the temp probe on Silo 4 bumped up 3 degrees. Not a lot, but enough to require a note in the log. I grabbed my kit and went out again. The air felt colder than it should, the kind of cold that sneaks under your shirt. I scanned the ladder cage with my light. A moth flickered, dust sparkled, and then my beam slid over footprints in the powdery grain dust at the silo's base. Fresh ones, small, almost delicate, like someone wearing slim work boots had walked a half circle and then stopped. The prints ended at the steel. "Hello?" I said it before I could stop myself. My voice went dull in the open air. No answer, just the wind grinding the ladder. I checked the hatch bolts with my wrench. Tight. I logged the temp myself, normal at the surface, and headed back. On the office window, I noticed a smudge I hadn't seen earlier. When I wiped it with my sleeve, my stomach went cold. It wasn't a smudge. It was a fingerprint on the inside of the glass, pressed from the outside. I told myself I was being paranoid. Somebody could have touched it earlier. Day crew, the manager, me. At 3:11 a.m., my desk phone rang once. Just once. Caller ID read Silo 4 Maintenance. We don't have internal lines labeled like that. I picked up anyway. Co-op. Silence. Then a 2-tone squeal, like a walkie keying up and not quite transmitting. Click. I put the handset down and stared at the wall clock. I could have called the manager, but I knew how it would sound. New guy, graveyard shift, hearing things. At 3:30, I decided I'd do one more sweep, partly to prove to myself nothing was wrong. I took the big mag light and the temp gun and walked past Silo 2, past Silo 3. When I reached Silo 4, the hair on my arms prickled. The inspection hatch was still bolted, but the ladder cage door, a little steel gate at the bottom, hung unlatched. We're required to lock those after every climb. I swung it open and shone my light up the ladder. The cage made the beam feel like I was looking through ribs. The access platform 20 feet up was empty. The hatch up top was closed. The wind pushed a high, thin whistle through the rungs. That's all I saw, but I could feel someone. That ridiculous sixth sense you ignore until you can't. I relatched the cage and forced myself to step away. As I turned, the mag light washed over the concrete base again and found something I'd missed. A strip of blue cloth snagged on a bolt head. When I tugged it free, it came away sticky. I lifted it to my nose before my brain caught up. It smelled like syrup. When I got back inside, I wrote the incident in the log and stuck the cloth into a bag. I sat down, stared at the dark window, and every light in the office went out. The backup battery clicked but didn't kick the fluorescence back on. Total darkness. Even the thermometer display blanked. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam bounced across the desk, the files, the clock. It read 3:41. In the reflection on the window, I saw myself, and something else, a thin vertical line of red moving behind me, sliding along the back wall like a laser on a slow search pattern. I spun. The light vanished. I told myself it was a truck's taillight through the blinds. I told myself anything. The power came back after maybe 15 seconds. The fluorescents screamed to life. Outside, a gust of wind hit the building so hard the wall flexed. At 4 a.m., I decided to stop pretending. I called the manager. He didn't pick up. I called our part-time maintenance guy, Hank. He answered on the third ring and listened while I tried not to sound crazy. Hank is the sort of man who doesn't say much. When he finished, he told me he was 10 minutes away. I stayed put and watched the monitors. Our cameras are terrible. 2 roof domes and 1 war-era DVR that eats tapes. But the east dome faces the silos. On its low-res night mode, I could make out the pale cylinders and the ladder cages like vertebrae. I watched Silo 4 until my eyes dried. At 4:08, a shape slid across the bottom of the frame. Small, quick. It ducked beneath the platform and settled in the shadow line like a folding chair collapsing. I grabbed the mag light and the big adjustable wrench from the emergency kit and stepped out again. The wind had died. Without it, the lot felt like a stage set after closing. Still, waiting. Gravel creaked under my boots. I walked around the far side of Silo 4, and that's when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. A thin nasal pull and release, like someone with a piece of tape over their nose. "Hey," I said, throat dry. "You can't be here." The breathing stopped. "Look, I'll call the sheriff, but if you're cold, I've got coffee in the office. Just come out where I can see you." Something shifted under the platform, a scuff, a knee on concrete. I squatted, angled the mag light, and my beam caught eyes deep in the corner, set too far apart, shining with the flat, wet look of an animal's. The shape jerked, scrambled, and climbed. It moved with this horrifying practiced economy, up the struts, into the ladder cage, boots clinking quick as teeth. I lunged for the cage door, but a hand inside yanked it shut and rattled the latch. I swore and started up after him. At the access platform, the night telescoped into the sound of my breathing and the hollow clang of boots. I hated how easy he seemed to move, like the rings of the ladder were sized for him. He reached the top hatch and disappeared over the lip. I froze. There's a reason the rulebook says never climb into a silo alone. Grain flows like liquid and kills like water. There was no way I was following him into that. I radioed Hank and told him to hit the base. I checked the hatch handle, locked from the inside. I crouched on the catwalk, peering through the vent slits. Darkness, then a faint scuffle. Grain whispering like dry rain. Something brushed the inside of the hatch near my face. A finger? A tool? It made a slow sliding sound and then tap. Light, deliberate, another tap. "Who are you?" I asked. No answer. Then a third tap, perfectly spaced, like a code. A set of headlights swept the lot, Hank's F-150. I shouted down to him. He circled, killed his engine, and called up that he'd cover the cage door. He sounded calm. Hank always sounds calm. I told him the guy was inside. Hank told me to get to the office and throttle the auger controls to 0 so nothing would shift. I hustled back, through the safeties, and grabbed the old bin schematics binder off the shelf. On the last page, someone had stuck a Polaroid, a kid, maybe 12, in a blue windbreaker, standing on the catwalk of Silo 4, giving the camera a thumbs up. On the back, JT97. I put the photo down like it burned. The blue cloth in the evidence bag, the syrup smell, the small boots. I was back at the door when Hank radioed. "He's coming down." I sprinted out. The ladder cage rattled. A small figure dropped the last 4 rungs and landed like a cat, then ran, not toward the lot, but around the far side, hugging the curve of the silo, into the shadow between 4 and 5. Hank moved to cut him off, but the kid, if it was a kid, slid under the catwalk like he'd done it 1,000 times. We cornered him between the service sheds. Hank kept his hands up, palms out. "Easy, buddy." The figure turned and pressed against the metal siding. I raised the mag light slowly. He wasn't a kid. He was small, yes, and thin enough to look weightless, but his face had the tight, dry look of someone who'd been living on salt and sugar. His hair was boyish. His eyes were very awake. Around his neck, a coil of red string and 3 little supermarket loyalty cards punched with holes. His windbreaker was blue, but the fabric had gone shiny from age. He looked about 12 and also 40, like time had folded wrong around him. "I work here," he said, voice papery. "My shift." Hank didn't take his eyes off him. "What's your name, man?" He stared past us at Silo 4. "JT," he said. "I keep the grain safe." My stomach lurched. The Polaroid. Hank talked. He's good at that. Kept his voice level, asked about a caretaker, about where JT slept. Little things. The answers came out wrong, like recordings played slowly. The attic. The catwalk. The stupid men forget the locks. His breath made that thin nasal whistle. The syrup smell. I realized what it was. Cough syrup. The cheap kind that makes you drowsy. His lips were stained red. I took the Polaroid out of my pocket and held it up. He stared at it with all the expression of a bird. "That's me," he said. The sheriff arrived with 2 deputies just as the eastern sky started to pale. They put JT in the warm back seat without cuffs. He didn't fight. He just craned his neck to keep Silo 4 in view as the door closed. They searched the property at sunrise and found his room in the attic of the old seed shed. A nest of tarps, empty cough syrup bottles, a pair of binoculars, and a deck of blank key cards with holes punched in them. They also found a small laser level taped to a stick. "For the rats," the deputy said. JT had been living on expired snack food and whatever sugar he could scrounge. He'd cut himself into places with a ring of skeleton keys e-taped together. We learned pieces in the weeks after. The co-op manager, who'd been here 25 years, remembered a crewman named John Thomas, JT, who went missing after a fall in 1997. They never found a body. His mother moved away. The theory was that he survived, half broke, and never left. He learned the schedules, watched the cameras, slipped out to correct what he thought others were doing wrong. He thought he worked here, and he did, in his way. The grain in Silo 4 was always inexplicably even. The ladder latches tended, the hatches tightened. The sheriff said JT would get help. The manager had to change every lock and weld the ladder cages closed at night. A month later, I took an early shift and promised myself I'd stop by Silo 4 for one last check before winter. The air was pure glass. When I reached the base, I saw something near the bolts, a new strip of blue cloth tied in a neat little bow, like a tag on a gift. I stood there with the October sun on my neck, listening to the wind move through the rungs, and realized 2 things at once. We hadn't found JT so much as noticed him. And somewhere along the way, this place had become more his than anyone's. Story 2. The Babysitter's Second Voice. I've babysat since I was 14. I'm 22 now, and I thought I'd seen every version of a bad night. Kids with stomach bugs, power outages, raccoons in trash cans. This night was different because nothing went wrong, until the moment I realized everything had already gone wrong, and I was just late to it. The family was new, a couple in their 30s with a 2-year-old named Ellie. Nice townhouse, smart lights, smart thermostat, smart everything. The mom ran me through the routine. Dinner at 6, bath at 7, bed by 8. She handed me a tablet that controlled lights and cameras and said, "If you need anything, you can talk to us over the baby monitor. We'll be at the restaurant down the block." Ellie was a dream. Ate her pasta, asked me to read the same picture book 3 times, curled up with a stuffed fox, out by 8:30. I cleaned the dishes, texted the mom a cute photo of Ellie's fox, and settled on the couch with a movie. At 9:11, the baby monitor popped from quiet to hiss. That's normal. Wi-Fi burps. I glanced at the video feed and saw the usual black and white crib shot. Ellie was a pale comma under her blanket. Then a voice came through the speaker. It wasn't the mom. It wasn't the dad. A man's voice, close, like he had his mouth near the microphone but was trying to keep it soft. "Hey, Ellie." I sat up too fast and knocked the tablet off the couch. My first dumb thought was that the parents were testing me, or the dad had logged in from the restaurant. But the tone was wrong, not friendly or teasing, familiar, like he'd said it 100 times. The monitor clicked. Someone on the other end switching channels. A breath. Then, "Ellie, can you wave?" Ellie's little hand lifted in the crib and waved toward the camera. I was on my feet and in the hallway before I knew what I was doing. I told myself it was a glitch, an echo, anything but a stranger talking to a sleeping child. The nursery door was cracked. I pushed it open and stepped in as gently as I could. Ellie slept. The stuffed fox lay under her cheek. The little LED on the camera glowed a steady blue. A second LED, one I hadn't noticed earlier, glowed a faint red. "Hello?" I whispered into the room, which is stupid, but I did it. "Mom? Dad?" Silence. Then the monitor hissed in my hand. Another voice, low, almost amused. "Shh, we're watching." I picked Ellie up. She stirred, made a soft sound, and pressed her face into my shoulder. I backed into the hall and pulled the door closed. I went downstairs, put the tablet on the counter, and started hitting every control. All the smart lights on, smart blinds up. I opened the app for the cameras, front door, living room, nursery, yard, and switched off each one. The nursery camera didn't go dark. "It's hardwired," I said out loud, like that would fix how terrified I felt. My phone buzzed. The mom. "Everything okay?" I called her. She picked up on the first ring. I explained, probably too fast, what I'd heard. The line went quiet. "That's not possible," she said. "The monitor is paired." "Then someone is paired," I said, "and they're watching." I heard a man's voice in the background, her husband, and then the clatter of cutlery, chairs. She said they were running back. I put Ellie in the playpen in the living room and stood between her and the kitchen, trying to listen to the whole house at once. I turned off the AC so the vents would stop speaking. The refrigerator seemed loud enough to drown a conversation. The baby monitor hissed again. "Hey, Ellie," the voice said, perfectly soft. "We can see your babysitter now." I picked up the monitor, hand shaking. "Who are you?" It came out sharp and high. The voice chuckled, a breathless, close sound. "Are you the new one?" "Get out of this house," I said, stupidly talking to a speaker. "Why?" he asked. "I'm not in it." The front camera app flashed motion detected. I tapped it. The porch looked empty. The timestamp ticked up cleanly. No person, no car. The backyard camera flashed motion. I tapped that. The image showed the string lights, the pale rectangle of patio, the fence. A half second of black interference tore diagonally across the screen, and then the image came back. Still, empty. I dialed 911 and put the phone on speaker. I explained, again too fast, that a stranger had accessed a baby monitor and was talking to a child, that the family was on their way home, that I was with the child, that I didn't see anyone outside. The dispatcher took our address and told me to stay on the line. "Ellie," the man said quietly over the monitor, "do you want to show me Foxy?" Ellie, half asleep in the playpen, lifted the stuffed fox and pressed its nose to the air as if she were handing it to somebody through the camera. On the kitchen island, the tablet chimed. The smart door lock unpaired itself. The app flashed red, connection lost. The dispatcher told me to go to a room I could lock and wait for officers. I grabbed Ellie, ran to the downstairs bathroom, the only door with a deadbolt, and shut us inside. The room was small and tiled and smelled like a hotel. I wanted to turn on the fan just to have a noise that wasn't my own heart. The monitor was still hissing, speaker against my thigh where I'd tucked it into my pocket. The voice came again, softer, like he'd leaned away from the mic. "Don't hide, I can't see you in there." The deadbolt felt cheap under my hand. Sirens, real ones. 2 sets, growing louder. I told the dispatcher I could hear them. Ellie pressed her face into my neck. I whispered to her about pancakes and foxes and anything else that would make my voice sound normal. The sirens cut, feet on the porch, a knock. "Police!" I cracked the door, then opened it. 2 officers cleared the downstairs quickly and professionally. One of them looked at the smart lock, the router, the camera tablet. He asked me to show him the nursery. We went up. The nursery camera was still on, wired into the wall, not just plugged. A neat little circle cut in the drywall where someone had fished the line. The officer's mouth flattened. "Ma'am," he said into his radio, "I'm going to need a tech unit and a warrant for the ISP. This looks modified." The parents rushed in 5 minutes later, pale and shaky. The mom scooped Ellie so fast the child squeaked. The dad kept saying, "We had a guy install everything, from the store. We watched him. He was in a branded shirt." The officer asked for the installer's info. The dad dug out a folder. The receipt had a company name I recognized, but the technician name looked like a placeholder. The officer called the store. A manager told him they didn't have a tech by that name on schedule that week. The tech unit arrived with a little hard case and calm movements. They opened the nursery camera first, pulled the faceplate off, and showed us a tiny second board inside, piggybacked on the main unit with a single wire. "A transmitter," the tech said. The signal didn't go through the house Wi-Fi at all. It piggybacked on the electric line, power line networking, and jumped to a second hidden device. They found that device in the attic taped to a joist above the nursery with a SIM card. The SIM dumped video out over a cell connection to God knows where. Whoever had been watching didn't need our Wi-Fi, didn't need our password. They had been in the house once and left behind an eye and a mouth. The baby monitor wasn't paired to the camera. It had a tiny mic board added in too. Someone had literally glued another voice inside. The officers pulled the SIM and bagged it. They said they'd get a warrant and send an investigator. They told us to stay at a hotel for the night. The mom cried. The dad kept looking at the receipts like the paper would explain itself. In the morning, after no sleep, I Googled the installer name again and found a neighborhood forum thread from last year. Parents in the next town over complaining about a fake tech who would show up on behalf of the store to finish the install. He wore the shirt. He carried the right bag. He even had a laminated badge. He would reposition cameras for a better angle, then leave. A month later, one family found a second transmitter in their attic. Another family started hearing a man say their kid's name through a speaker they didn't know their monitor had. Police think it's one person, maybe two, working neighborhoods like ours. Take an order for a legitimate install. Come back with a branded shirt and an old ticket number. Add a little extra something to the baby's room. I still babysit, but I bring my own portable white noise machine now and turn it up loud enough to mask whispers. I tape over lenses. I ask the parents to show me exactly which devices are on and which ones are not. Sometimes late at night, I'll hold a monitor and stare at the LED until it blurs, and I'll swear I hear a breath that isn't mine right before the static. Story 3. The last train to Crowthorne. I work hospitality in Reading, late shifts that snap you in and out of other people's joy. We close at 11. If I miss the 23:19 to Crowthorne, I have to wait for the midnight train, which is mostly empty enough to hear your own thoughts scratch their way out. This was a Tuesday in early spring. Rain, thin, steady, the kind that makes everything shine but never quite floods. I made the 23:19, slid into a window seat and put my bag between me and the aisle. There were maybe 5 other passengers in the carriage, a girl with blue hair and headphones, a man scrolling his phone, an elderly couple asleep with their heads leaning together, and a guy in a dark beanie who kept his hood up over it, which felt redundant. We rattled out of Reading. I texted my flatmate, "Be home in 30. The train hummed and rocked. The beanie guy got up and stood 2 carriages down near the doors, pretending to look out at the black. At the next stop, Wokingham, a group got on and filled the carriage with normal noise for a minute. Wet coats, perfume, laughter, then filtered away into the next coach. The beanie guy returned to a seat 1 row behind me on the other side. He never took the hood down. Every time the carriage lights dimmed through a junction, I could see our faces reflected in the window. Mine, tired, his, a dark lump that never turned toward the glass. My phone pinged. AirDrop. Unknown wants to share a photo. I don't keep AirDrop on for everyone, but I'd been sending a staff member an invoice earlier and hadn't turned it back. I tapped to preview the photo. It was my face, from 5 minutes ago. I was leaning against the window, eyes half closed, the exact angle of the reflection. My bag strap was visible. The timestamp sat in the corner. I felt a cold, precise line draw itself across my scalp. I declined the AirDrop. Another request came in, this time a note. You missed a spot of mascara. I locked my phone as if that would lock reality. I peered into the window reflection. The beanie guy's head was tilted, toward me, I realized, not at the reflection, at me. I glanced up the carriage. The blue-haired girl had her eyes closed. The elderly couple was asleep. The scrolling man had gotten off at Wokingham. The beanie guy lifted his phone and angled it down like he was texting, but his posture had that sideways awareness of a cat right before it pounces. I texted my flatmate, weirdo on train, might get off early. She wrote back fast, call me. I didn't want to be the noise that made him sure he had me. We approached Crowthorne. The station is small. One dim platform, a car park, a bus stop that lies about schedules. I stood up early and moved to the carriage doors. The beanie guy stood up too, 2 seconds later, as if reacting to me. I stepped into the next carriage like I'd changed my mind. He followed. I stepped into the vestibule at the end and waited. When the doors opened, I slipped out back into my original carriage and onto the platform, hoping to lose him in the little swap. It bought me maybe 4 seconds. He emerged onto the platform with his hood still up, phone in his hand, head angled down like he was looking at timetables instead of me. Crowthorne platform at midnight feels like the edge of the map. The station building is a box of light with a shutter pulled halfway. There's a wide red button for emergencies that looks like a prop. The ticket machine eats coins. I started walking toward the exit, heart high. I could hear his footsteps behind me stop and start, left, right, matching me through the reflection in the glass shelter. I fumbled in my bag for my keys, my umbrella, anything that could be a weapon without looking like I was holding a weapon. He airdropped again. We're neighbors. I declined, shoved the phone into my coat, and kept walking. The car park was mostly empty, slick and smelling like rain on warm oil. The CCTV dome on the corner of the station building glowed like a lazy moon. I had a choice: the lit road that goes past the pub and takes 5 minutes longer, or the cut-through footpath by the wreck that halves the walk but feels like a throat. I went lit. I wanted every porch camera, every fox, every bored insomniac smoker on a doorstep. He kept pace at about 20 meters. I crossed. He crossed. He never closed the distance. It was like he wanted to keep me in a particular frame. At my street, I did something that felt like the wrong choice even while I made it. I turned early onto the next cul-de-sac, walked straight to the end, and faced a hedge so I could watch the mouth of the street. He rounded the corner and stopped dead when he saw me waiting. For the first time, I got a clear look. No beanie, no hood. He'd taken them down like you do when you get home. He looked ordinary, 35-ish, pale, a little gaunt, eyes too bright with the focused kindness you see in people who volunteer to help you carry something heavy but won't meet your eyes while they do it. The smile he gave me looked practiced and almost sorry. Evening, he said, as if we'd met at a bus stop. His voice was soft, slightly local. You wouldn't remember it 5 minutes later. Do you live around here? I asked, louder than I meant to. Used to, he said. I know the trains. I held my keys and showed him I was looking at his shoes and hands. He lifted both palms chest high like, see? Then he did the thing that made this real in a way the AirDrops hadn't. He looked past me at the hedge, at the line where the cul-de-sac's dead end hid the backs of the houses, and said without inflection, "You've got one of those cameras on your porch with a chime. Rings when someone's there even if you're not." I didn't move. He smiled that almost sorry smile again and took one step back. "I'm trying to be better," he said, like it was a line he'd been told to practice. Then he left, walked back the way he'd come, hands in pockets, posture loose. I didn't follow. I stood there listening to the rain. I waited 5 minutes, then took the long way home, detouring past the chippy and the shut post office. When I reached my house, the porch chime pinged my phone because of me. I stared at the black screen before unlocking it, then unlocked it and went inside. I didn't sleep. At 02:13, my porch camera app lit with history. I scrolled. There I was, walking up, fumbling keys. There was a fox at 01:08 and a cat at 01:52. Then I saw a clip at 23:47. The exact minute my train left Reading marked motion. It showed the porch, empty except for rain. Then a figure, me, stepping into frame and standing with my head tilted, listening. Except I wasn't there. I was at work. The clip was a screen recording of some kind, superimposed, but the time and the angle matched my porch exactly. A perfect little fake-to-see doubt. I sent the clip to my flatmate and then to the non-emergency police email with the story and the AirDrop screenshots. They called the next afternoon. The officer on the line said they'd flagged it and would forward to British Transport Police, and that I should disable AirDrop to contacts only, which felt like a plaster for a fracture. He told me to carry a personal alarm and consider a taxi on late nights. He said he was sorry this had happened. He said it like he says it a lot. 2 nights later, someone pressed my porch chime at 0307, a time that sounds like a story even if it's just a time. The camera captured a hand and then nothing, as if someone had leaned in until the lens could only see skin. That week I changed the route I walk from the station every night. I asked a mate from work to ride 2 stops past his usual just to walk me back once in a while. I learned the names of 3 foxes on my street by their tails. Last month I opened my mail to find a penalty fare notice for a trip I didn't take. From Crowthorne to Wokingham on a day I was off work, stamped with my rail card number. The CCTV still attached to the notice shows a dark hooded figure tapping a card at the gate. You can't see his face. You can see the wrist strap on the card. Mine is a red plaited leather. Common, replaceable. I called the number on the notice. The woman at the other end was kind. She said these things happen and that they'd cancel the charge if I brought the physical card into the station to verify. People clone cards now, she said, or swap. I found my card in my wallet. The red strap looked the same. The last 4 digits looked the same. At the bottom edge there was a nick in the plastic I didn't recognize, like someone had popped it out of a sleeve and popped it back. They canceled the fare. They suggested I replace the card. The man at the counter, 50-ish and gentle, looked over my shoulder at the platform while he spoke, like he was trying not to spook anything. I still take the 2319 sometimes. I sit in a different carriage, swap seats at the last minute, stare at every reflection like it's a person wearing my face. I keep AirDrop off and my alarm in my pocket. When the train slows, I stand up early and let 3 people go ahead of me through the door, because someone once told me strangers can't fix on you if you move like a trick of light. Last week, the beanie man, maybe the same, maybe not, stood 2 carriages down again, hood up over beanie. He didn't AirDrop, he didn't follow. He just watched the train doors open and close, counting the rhythm like a metronome. When we pulled away, I saw him in the window, my face for 1 second, his face the next. Like the carriage glass was shuffling a deck and putting us next to each other to see who blinked first. If you're hearing this, it means you made it to the end, which is more than some of tonight's storytellers can say. If you have a true story, night shift, home alone, last train, share it in the comments. Your nightmare might be the next voice on Midnight Movie Recaps. Subscribe for more real horror told in cinematic detail, and sleep with intention, because once you notice the pattern, it tends to notice you back.